Hey, so welcome to the channel. My name's Cheryl Miller, and in these interviews, I'm bringing you success stories of people that have broken the mold and followed their path instead of being limited by what others expect them to be based on their race, gender, or any other stereotype. So these stories are here to inspire you. So if you want to hear more, please like, share, and subscribe so that you don't miss out. So my guest today is the lovely Shazia Wazir, who is not just an accountant. She's a very experienced senior finance professional. She's worked for some of the UK's well-known retail brands, and more than just a finance person, I would say she's also a people person. She's led large teams and currently has a leading role on a large finance transformation program that we both know and love. So welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. So, as I was saying, in terms of what I'm trying to do with these interviews is just really tap into the mindset that kind of helps people push beyond what is expected of them. And the reason that you kind of came to the forefront in terms of this interview is, so I've worked in a handful of really big corporates, big blue chips. And obviously as an interim, I've worked in quite a few organisations. And I think it's fair to say you're probably the most senior finance person that I've come across who is also a female Muslim, which is like amazing. So
interesting.
I've got to have Shazia on, you know. I don't come across that many women of colour in senior finance roles anyway. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it was you had to be part of this.
Oh, thank you.
So let's start from the beginning. Just tell me a bit about your early years, your background, you know, where you're from and what it was like growing up.
So funnily enough, most people don't believe me, but I was actually born in Norway. So I'm blonde underneath and I'm blue-eyed. No, I'm not really. But yeah, I was born in Norway, and I think when we talk about how different you are, and not just being Asian and Muslim, but when I grew up in Norway, I didn't even go to a normal local public Norwegian school. My dad insisted that we went to an English school because he never wanted to stay in Norway or in Scandinavia long term. And back in the day when I went to school, they didn't teach English as a subject in Central Europe in normal schools. So I ended up going to a RAF school.
Right.
So I learned to speak English and studied in English schools from a very early age. So when I went to that school, everybody in that school was from an RAF background, so their parents were posted out there for that reason. So I was different anyway. Then I was Asian, and there were no Asians other than my brother in the school, which was 3 years later when he kind of joined the school, and no Muslims either. So actually backtracking from there, my dad wanted me to go to an English school, and that was the only English school within, I don't know, a 40-mile radius or whatever it was. And they had no space available in the year that I was supposed to start. So he found me a space in a school in Sweden instead.
Wow.
Exactly. So I don't even know how he did it. I don't know. So I went to the International School of Stockholm, is where I started, which is an American school. And he found himself a job there just so I could go to that school.
Wow.
So we were there for 2 years. And again, when I started there, I knew no English. My parents brought us up to speak Urdu in the house, which is being a Pakistani, that's kind of the national language that we speak. I couldn't really write it, but I could speak it. And when I went to school, I did not know, couldn't understand a word of what anybody said.
Right.
But as kids, I suppose you learned it really quickly. So I did 2 years there. In the 2 years, a space became available back in the school in Norway, which was St. George's, and we moved back there. So we did that. And then having done that,
that's a real sacrifice, I guess, you know, on the part of your dad in terms of kind of uprooting, to go and make it work, you know, in terms of education. So education was obviously really important.
Yeah. So for my dad, he's always put education right at the top of the agenda. Everything else can be sacrificed. Education comes first, which is really interesting. And like you say, I don't know, with no internet or any of those things, how you even begin to find yourself a job in a different country. I don't know. But also I look at myself and I go, I moved from one end of Milton Keynes to the other for schools, and I thought that was a sacrifice.
Yeah. moving from country to country. I mean, and that really does, you know, as you say, in terms of your dad putting sort of, you know, academia at the top of the pile, that just proves it, doesn't it? I mean, that's, you know, I've never heard of anybody doing anything like that.
And I still haven't come across anybody else who's done anything like that either, although I tell my story to people and like, wow, didn't realise that, you know, anybody would go to those lengths, but he obviously did.
Yeah.
And then my mum and dad's plan always was that eventually they would move back to Pakistan, which is where they were from. So when I was 10, we moved from Norway to Pakistan. And now I was different in Pakistan because I could speak Urdu, couldn't really write it. I was fluent in speaking it, but yeah, you could tell I was different. Right. And then when we went there, my dad put us in English schools again. And I probably grew up, and I didn't really think of this until later on in life, that all the people that were around me who went to those schools all had a very similar background to me, in the sense that they were born somewhere else outside of Pakistan, and then their parents had decided they wanted to relocate back. So they were early years, and a lot of them were actually from the UK.
Right.
So a lot of my friends who now live in the UK again, I know from school back in Pakistan, because that's what the journey that their parents took, and at some point they've then relocated back. Yeah. So then I moved there, and then I went to school there, went to college there, went to university there, started work there. Didn't train to be an accountant there, so I did my MBA there, and did work in the finance team though for a couple of years in telecoms. Right. And by that time, our family was just totally dispersed over all continents. So I had one brother in Canada, one in the UK, my dad was in Norway, my mum was in Pakistan, and I was the only one with her. And she was the main carer for her mum, which was the main reason why we stayed. And then my grandma passed away. And when that happened, we all decided to converge in the UK somehow or the other, because my brother, who was in Canada, couldn't work in Canada without a work permit. And he's an economist, so he decided that he would move to the UK, which is the best place to be in. And one of my brothers was already studying in the UK, so we all converged here. And then, yeah.
So just, I like the story in terms of how, you know, you've gone to this English school, and there's definitely something about, there's a long-term strategy in that, you know, so for the parents that have done that for the children. So what was the view? Is it just that it would give you guys more opportunities, or was the thinking, you know, that you were more likely to be able to get, you know, good jobs outside of Pakistan, or what, you know, what's the strategy behind that? I
think my dad's initial reason for doing it was it's an international recognised language, so it allows you to actually go wherever in the world you want to, because in Scandinavia, back in the day, you didn't know any English and you only knew Norwegian, you could probably only find opportunities or stay within those countries because you wouldn't know that language. And because he wanted to go back to Pakistan, he didn't have any other options. He wasn't going to send us to, there was no Urdu schools. So in his view, it was the safest bet is that you go to an English school. And then when we moved from there to Pakistan, in Pakistan, there is still this thing, which is if you go to, anywhere there is the state schooling isn't very good. Okay. So practically if you can afford it, because the fees aren't that bad, if you can afford it, all children will end up going to private schools, and all private schools are English schools. Okay. So it was just one of those paths that we ended up taking, and so I ended up doing my O-levels rather than the normal system that I would have gone through. Yeah. Although the world had moved on to GCSEs at that point in time, they hadn't quite gone to GCSEs in some parts of the world, so I still ended up doing my O-levels. So I am ancient, but not that ancient. I could have done my GCSEs.
Exactly. Well, definitely, because I think I was the second year of GCSEs, and I know you're younger than me, so yeah. So that's strange. So, and in theory, O-levels are harder, right? So
yeah, I don't know.
So, and just tell me about university. What did you do at uni, and why? What degree did you go for?
So I'd always knew from day dot that I love numbers. I've been a math child, let's say. I've just loved it. And I'm very logical. Give me anything like geography or history to do, I'm like, oh God, this is so boring. I can't cope. So I just knew I was going to follow the path of sciences, for example. I just knew that. And math being something that I just love. The opportunities in a country like Pakistan when you go to university are very, very limited compared to the plethora that you get here in the UK or anywhere else in the world. And so it's, if you're going down a sciences route, this is what you're going to study. So when I was in college, I ended up doing math, chemistry and physics, then had statistics at some point, and pure maths and applied and God knows what, and then I hated it at one point. But when I was going to university, the options that were in front of me, to be honest, I could do an MBA, I could do a management and public policy, or I could go down the computer sciences route. And I did kind of think, or do I do computer sciences, IT, so, you know, the whole new world's coming along, and that's when, you know, we were having all this Microsoft and all that was coming out. I thought, oh, I'd like to do that. And it's a bit of it's a funny story, but I spoke to a few people who had already graduated from the university and said, what do I do? I had no real inclination between the two of an MBA or because, you know, I was like, yeah, numbers will be relevant in both. Yeah. And what somebody said to me was, well, if you want to be in the cool crowd, do your MBA, or if you want to be a geek, then do your computer sciences. So I chose to do it literally based on that.
Right.
Not a very academic choice, but there you go.
Cool.
I did do a major in finance when I was there because I knew that was kind of where my head was at, rather than marketing or something else.
Yeah. So in terms of, and you know, so you always liked numbers and sciences. So in terms of the sorts of jobs that you thought you wanted to do when you were younger, you know, was it always going to be numbers related, or did you have any wild and wacky thoughts of something you might want to do when you're older?
If you grew up in a culture like a Pakistani culture, your parents always say to you, you're going to be a doctor or you're going to be an engineer, and that's it. You draw the line under those two. I think the world has moved on now. I'm talking like 30 odd years ago. This is where life was. And if you were going to be anybody, that's what you were going to do. And I wasn't really going to do that, which was really, and I knew I didn't. At one point I thought, oh, actually I could do medicine. But I thought if I did that, that's the one route that I would take, that I would have no numbers. I did like biology, but I thought, no, I'm not doing that. And it came to engineering. I actually got into an engineering university. I applied for one, I got into it, but it was miles away from home, and it was the first intake of students they're taking in that year. They'd literally just opened, it was a new university, and myself and my friend were the only two females in the batch. The rest of the 100 people or whatever were just boys, and we were a bit like, I don't think I want to really do this just because. So I thought I'll just keep that I got in there, but we decided, both of us, you know, it was like either both of us go or neither of us goes. Yeah. And then it was that far away, and it's like, nah, I'm not doing it. So we decided not to go. We chickened out a little bit. In terms of jobs, it's a very different environment, and it may have changed in Pakistan. I haven't been there for 20 years. I don't know. You don't have recruitment agencies, you don't have job boards, you didn't have any of that at the time when I was growing up. Obviously with the open of the, you know, the internet and everything, that there probably is now, but there wasn't at the time. And it was more by word of mouth. You knew somebody, or living in Islamabad where I lived, there were only a handful of companies anyway, so it's not exactly a very big city. And I'd finished my exams, I hadn't had my results for uni yet, and I got a phone call from a senior of mine who I knew quite well, working in one of the telecoms, and she worked in FP&A. Didn't even know what FP&A was at the time. She rang me and she said, oh, we're looking for, in finance, there's a role come up, do you want to come for it? And my initial thought was, I haven't even got my results yet, I'm not sure how I feel about this, and I'm still going through this whole emotional roller coaster of having finished uni and life ended for me. And I thought, you know what, I'll just go for the interview just for practice. I genuinely didn't really know what would be involved. I pulled a CV together, I went for this interview, and I came back thinking, I have no idea how I've done, which was with the initial kind of the head of FP&A at the time. I thought, you know, we'll see what happens. I got called back for a second interview within the week with the FD, and I thought, oh dear. So I went back and had that interview, which was a bit of a chat. And then I called back and got told I'd got the job, and I thought, I have no idea what I said, what I did, but yeah, here we go. So I ended up with my first role in FP&A, and I actually, the first month or so, I was a bit all over the place because, you know, I hadn't used email on a daily basis or any of those things, but given about a month or two into it, I absolutely loved it. and I think I've just never looked back.
Yeah, and that was in Pakistan.
Yeah, that was in Pakistan. Yeah.
Fantastic. And FP&A, so for those that are watching that aren't finance buffs, so it's financial planning and analysis.
Yes, budgeting, forecasting, that kind of lovely stuff.
Excel spreadsheets.
Yes, lots of Excel spreadsheets.
So how long did you stay in Pakistan working for before you sort of then moved to the UK?
3 years, I think it was.
Okay.
Yes, 98 and 2001 is when we moved over. So yeah,
and then
3 years.
What was the integration back into the UK like? So how easy did you find it to kind of get back into the workplace?
Not very easy. So having lived out there in Pakistan and, you know, worked in the industry that I worked, I'd kind of moved up quite quickly through the ranks. And by the time I came back here, I was actually heading up one of the FP&A teams in one of the businesses out there. So I came here, and here at least there was a structure of there's recruitment agencies, you take your CV to them. The problem that I faced when I went in was I had no experience in the UK, and I had no references or anybody that somebody could pick up the phone to and go, you know, is this for real? So it wasn't, although the business that I'd worked for were all multinationals, and the CFOs or the FDs that I'd worked for were all from the UK, because generally speaking, multinationals will recruit people from the UK because the CIMA and ACCA are UK-based exams, and anybody who's qualified in those will come from the UK, generally speaking. So in Pakistan, the businesses that I worked for, that's where their basic finance leads came from. But what I really struggled was trying to get in front of anybody for an interview, even because I had no relevant experience from the UK. So one of the recruitment agencies advised me and said, look, temp somewhere for a bit, try and get your foot in the door that way. And I thought, okay, you know what, not a bad idea. So I actually got into what was called Stone & Webster at the time, a construction company, and I went in there quite a junior role. Yeah. And I have to say that is one of the times in my life where you falter and you doubt yourself and you go, is this all I'm really capable of? Because you're going in there and you're going, I can do so much more than this. But the role that you're offering me is so junior compared to what I know I have the ability to do. And I had a lovely line manager when I went there. She was an Australian or New Zealand, I can't quite remember. And she basically said to me that I think they've really undersold you. And I said, but I do understand their problem at the same time as to what's going on. So given that I then had that, I actually only did that role for about 8 weeks, 12 weeks, I think. Then left, and I'd already started studying for my CIMA. So I thought, you know what, rather than spending my days here, I'm going to go and take my CIMA exams and then see what happens. Yeah. So I left and took my first lot of, or whichever set of CIMA exams I had to take, because I had quite a few exemptions, did those exams, and then applied again after that, and just got lucky, I suppose. So I started working for Ingram Micro. So I did that for about, I can't remember, 3-4 years. And then a very long stint in Argos after that.
and just tell me about sort of your progression in terms of roles and experience within sort of finance roles, and any challenges that you found along the way.
So when I started off in Pakistan, I think that the roles were quite limited. The progression was the teams were a lot smaller, because although there were big businesses in a small city and it was telecoms, it was growing at the time. It's massive now, but it was much, much smaller then. Yeah. So you had small teams of 2-3 people in FP&A, more processy type teams within finance. So I actually, the company that I worked for, I don't think now exists. Millicom still exists. So Millicom is the parent company. They bought out another telecom company in the same city. So I moved from one to the other and actually took all that I knew from one to the other one, and then grew the FP&A team. So actually, I think my progression in the early years happened quite quickly. Right. Then when I moved from there to the UK, I had to start at a much lower base and then build myself back up. And I still remember when I went for my interview at Ingram Micro, the FD said to me, so given that you've only done 12 weeks as a temp in one of these organisations, how do I know that, although he'd interviewed me and asked me loads of questions and actually asked me to solve some things in a P&L and a balance sheet, actually said to me, how do I know that, that I'm not taking a gamble? And I just said to him, I said, you're not going to know until you try, and anybody's going to be a gamble. How do you know what anybody's telling you is true? So what can I say? Kind of thing. And he went, fine, I'll take the gamble. So it was the progression in Ingram. Again, I worked in FP&A there, and worked in FP&A for about a year before they moved FP&A from UK to Brussels, which is where their kind of European head office was, and then moved to the UK business and did some marketing there. Then I stagnated because it was a smaller business, because they'd lost their international team, which had gone to Brussels, and it was just the UK based. And the next bit was, oh, how do you become the controller now? Because until he leaves, where do you go?
Yeah.
So at that point, I was fortunate enough as to not have a lot of responsibilities in life, let's say. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to quit. I'm going to quit, and I'm going to go and do something. I'd actually qualified at that point, and I thought, I'm just going to go and do something for myself, or I don't know what, for a little while, and then decide what I do. So I actually didn't apply for jobs. I left. I went on a bit of a journey of self-discovery, if you know what I mean. So I kind of took a few self-development courses here and there. I actually started to understand and connect to my religion a bit more, took some of those courses. And while I was doing that, so I'd been off for about 3 months, Ingram Micro had overtaken a company in India, and they were pulling a team together to just go out there and help with bits and pieces. So they rang me and said, if you're not doing anything, do you want to go out there? I went, okay, I'll do that. That's more interesting than coming to work here. So I actually went and did that as a project. Then came back, then tried to learn Arabic, did some DIY. I think I took pretty much about a year out doing bits and pieces.
I mean, it sounds amazing, and actually, I think a lot of people, I would say, particularly in the corporate space, could probably do with some time like that, because otherwise, you just end up on this treadmill, don't you, like the hamster wheel, and you literally never get off. And then, in 20 years, you're sort of thinking, what am I doing here? But in terms of like quitting, then. How did people around you sort of react to that? Do you have a lot of people telling you that you were very brave, or that you were very stupid, or do you know what I mean? How did that go down?
I don't think anybody told me to my face that I was stupid, but I'm sure there were quite a few probably thinking that. And the interesting thing was, because I'd just qualified, it was just like qualified and out of a job. What are you trying to do, kind of thing? But I was really clear. I said, where's the progression going to come here? I can stay in this role. There's no sideways move. The team's quite small. So my line manager totally understood what I was doing and why I was trying to do that. And I suppose for me, the one thing that I've always done is I've never burnt my bridges wherever I've left. So I've still stayed in touch with anybody and everybody that I know who could at some point later on in life you might need, or for whatever reason, but I've always left on good terms. And so I made it really clear that had nothing to do with them, and they got it. So there were people who were like, wow, what are you going to do with your time? And I hadn't really planned it out. It was one of those which was, I don't know, I'm going to try a few things and see what works. But also they did know that I did have the luxury of not having a mortgage to pay at the time, for example. So I thought, you know what, this is probably one of my few chances in life when I'll be able to do something like this. So why not take the opportunity and do it now?
Absolutely.
And actually, I think I have a track record of doing that. I did that back in Pakistan once. So in those 3 years, I left after, I think, the first year I worked there, and travelled to the UK and to Norway and met old family, and actually came to the UK and tried to figure out if I wanted to study further or I wanted to still carry on working, because I was in that frame of, I don't think I'd quite left the academia side of things. Then decided the whole academia thing, that's when I decided I'd start doing a SEMA from an academic perspective.
It's really interesting. It almost sounds like when somebody takes like a sabbatical or something, they just want some time out to kind of figure out, okay, what next? And it was interesting, you said about sort of the journey of self-discovery, somewhat in that year. So what did you discover? What kind of came out of it for you?
So I think it allowed me some time to reflect and connect with who really being Muslim was. I had grown up in a Muslim culture, and all of this, bells and whistles that go with it, but a lot of it is cultural and not actually religious at all. And I always, in my head, used to think, how do I know if I'm doing something that's religious or cultural? Just because somebody or my parents said so, everybody else does it. How do I not know that that's not that? So coming to the UK, one of the things I did discover is the amount of the resources available to you. I didn't have those resources available to me in Pakistan when I was there. So when I thought, you know what, let me delve into this and try and figure out, London is just accessible. There are so many, short courses you can go and do there. So I did an Arabic course, a language course that, and little bits to just kind of go, what is real, what isn't? And I think for me, that time that I took off was more about connecting with my religion and trying to understand bits of it. And although it wasn't like going and doing a PhD on it or a thesis or anything, it was little bits that I actually did. So for me, that time was well spent just probably busting some of the myths that I thought were real, or kind of going, well, actually, you know what, I don't have to do that, or oh, it's more important to do that thing there. And that kind of was quite interesting for me. I didn't have a massive social network at the time. Hadn't been in the UK for that long. But I didn't have a massive network or anything. So I actually went off and built one, or got to know quite a lot more people through that. So that was quite interesting.
Brilliant. And I mean, well, let's just talk about that now as well. So you're wearing these headphones, right? So tell us about, because are you going to be speaking on the radio later or something? So you do this thing. Is it just around Ramadan that you do?
Yeah.
Explain what
So
you're doing.
in Ramadan, cities can get a license with FM to run a channel on FM just in the month of Ramadan. And basically you can have it at any time in the year, I think, but it has to be for a specific time period. So in Ramadan, Milton Keynes will normally go out and different organisations will put a bid in or say this is what they're going to do, and they will basically assign the license to one only. So radio, it's called Radio Ramadan, or RFM, Ramadan FM is what we call it in Milton Keynes. Apparently it's been going on for 20-25 years and I didn't know about it, but for the last 5-6 years I've kind of delved in and out of it. And it's one of those where I do a show once a week and we'll talk about various different wacky things. Sometimes they're more wackier than others. And what we try and do is kind of talk about it from a secular point of view and then bring a bit of an Islamic spin to say, what does Islam say about it? So last year we did, so I do it with a friend of mine. So it's not just me talking, and her husband sometimes dips in and out of it. This year's really interesting because we're doing it in lockdown, so we don't actually have a studio to go to. Otherwise, I wouldn't have these at home. So we normally have a little studio set up, and you can go in there. They've got the headphones and the mics and everything, but we're all having to remotely broadcast, which is really interesting because the amount of instances of people leaving Google Hangouts on and talk in the background, and the volume's going all over the place. But we're trying our best. So I did a show on Tuesday, which was about minimalism.
One of my favourite topics.
Is it?
Yeah. I'm giving it a go.
Are you?
I'm trying to slowly start to work towards it. Yeah.
So it's inspired me because I hadn't really thought of it, but we came up with it as a topic. Neither of us are minimalists. But yeah, so I've thought about it and thought, you know what, maybe I can try a few of these things in here.
Yeah. And how does it connect this? You said about on the radio show, kind of taking like a secular topic and then kind of connecting it to sort of Islam. So what's the stint on it from a sort of religious viewpoint?
So from an Islamic viewpoint, minimalism, like you'll know, it's not just about having less, it's about having less to create space to do things that are more important for you. And Islam is exactly that, which says don't attach yourself to materialistic things. You are only here in this world for a short period of time. Do good. The main reason why you're here is to do good and to connect with your Lord and to help people at the end of the day. So actually it ties in beautifully with it. The two aren't actually different. I think the additional piece that goes on in Islam with it is the fact that it's not just about having less. You can have whatever you want to have or have, just don't attach yourself to those from a materialistic point of view.
Yeah.
So it's just adding, I think, a second layer to it that says, it doesn't matter if you've got something that costs £10,000 and you lost it tomorrow, don't worry, which is really a hard thing to do. Oh, it was hard earned money, that £10,000 I lost. But yeah, it's about that.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love that. And then, so thinking about that, so you had like this year of sort of like self-discovery and sort of reconnecting with you know, who you are and your beliefs, etc. Has that had an impact then on how you are then in the workplace and on your sort of career path?
I don't think it had an immediate effect then. I think it's something that over time, it's a seed that's planted in your brain and you gradually grow with it.
Yeah.
So I think at that time, I would quite call myself quite newly trying to understand what the religion was about and all those things. And I don't think I was 100% comfortable with some of them, a lot of them. And it's those things that I would say, oh, I should wear a headscarf, and I do. And I started wearing it properly when I was at Ingram. I didn't used to wear it properly before then. And I started doing it there, but I don't think I was 100% comfortable with it still. It still felt a bit like, people probably look at me awkwardly, or I'm not quite sure. And if you had known me back in the day, I probably only owned like beige and grey and like really muted coloured scarves. And that's what I wore all the time. And I look back at any of those pictures and I go, what was I ever thinking? I mean, they drain the colour out of me. They make me look like a ghost half the time. But I think it was one of those techniques that I thought in my brain made me blend in. Maybe you wouldn't notice it so much, but I refuse to wear black. I still refuse to wear black because in my head it's just too stark. I can't do it. But everything was a very muted palette. Yeah. I think what happened after that was I still wore a very muted palette. And then as part of self-discovery, not just there, but when I was with Argos, is when I started learning about insights. That, I think, flipped things for me, not just from a career perspective, but mentally, professionally, personally, in all sorts of ways that allowed me to understand who I really was, which then meant that I felt more comfortable with who I was. And it was really bizarre because it was my line manager who actually said to me, she said, where have all these colours come from? And I went, I have no idea. And I suddenly went through this being so comfortable with who I was and being more comfortable with what I wore and all of those things that I actually thought, why am I trying to hide myself behind this when actually it makes me look a lot better if I wear pink or something that's, a bit more vibrant. And I just literally chucked all of that stuff away and I went on this shopping spree and bought myself, and I've never ever looked back. And if you look at my wardrobe, it's just full of every colour of scarf. I mean, there are some colours that I will stay away from because they just are too stark against my face, but I probably own every colour under the planet, and I'll wear them. And now I don't even think that I'm wearing it or anybody is judging me because of it. It's a psychological shift, I think, that's happened a little bit over time. Yeah. And I think partly I've always been different from day one, where in whatever public setting I have been in from school from day one. And I think because I've always been different, I've just got used to being different. Yeah. But it's something really bizarre. I think I felt more when I started wearing a headscarf that somebody would look at me differently, but I've never ever, I don't know why, but I've never felt that somebody looks at me differently because I'm a woman or because I'm Asian or because I'm Muslim. I've never put those three together and thought that somebody looks at me differently because of that. And I don't know whether it's something in my brain just doesn't allow me to think that way. So where people go, oh, I went into that shop, or the way I was served by the assistant in there, they must have done that because of, I was wearing a headscarf, or because I've got brown skin, or I don't know. I have never felt that way. And I don't believe that I've never been treated that way. I'm sure in my so many years of life, somebody must have looked at me that way, but I just don't register it. It's just never registered with me that somebody's treating me differently because of the way I look. Yeah. Bizarre.
It's such a common theme, like genuinely in these interviews that I've done, it's a common theme. It's almost as though people that have kind of pushed beyond it, things have happened in their life, but it's almost like they forget it. I mean, the term I used the other day with somebody, I said, I think it's almost like just swatting flies. You just get rid of them and they don't even register, you don't file them. You kind of just carry on. And it's only when you sometimes have to stop and think or reflect, you might think, oh, was that because of what? But actually it just doesn't, you just don't file it because you don't need it. What is it to you?
So I've never, because, and I suppose, like I say, because I've always dealt with being different, I've just always kind of gone, yeah, whatever, you deal with the fact that I'm different, or you know, I don't know. I can't change myself every single time I'm going to go from one setting to a different setting. And the amount of settings I've been through, I am who I am. I'm not going to lie, my accent's probably changed a few times, but those things probably happen. But no, I've never felt that if I'm going for an interview tomorrow, I will never feel that I am being judged because I'm wearing a headscarf, because I'm a woman, because I'm Asian, because I'm, I don't know, Muslim. I've never thought that. I've just thought, I'm sure you're going to judge me on what's coming out of my mouth.
Yeah. And just about, see, you talked about the insights almost being like a bit of a turning point. So when you so just explain kind of what that process was for you and how that led to you sort of, I guess, being more comfortable in your own skin. Do you know what I mean? So
I think everybody goes through this. As you're going through your career, you kind of go, oh, do I want to be like that person? Or you observe other people around you and you go, oh, so-and-so is a really good speaker. And so-and-so is really good at when they talk to you. Or I want to be, and I wonder how they are, like, you know, who they are. And you want to kind of emulate that. Mm-hmm. And you find it really difficult because you think, but I'm not that person. So how can I achieve the same thing, but do it differently? And I'd never thought of it that way. I'd never thought that I was different, or each individual behaves in a different way. So you always kind of either undermine yourself, or you think, I'm never going to be good enough to do X, Y, and Z. And what Insights did for me was it kind of, and especially doing it in a setting which is a team setting. So it wasn't just a do the Insights questionnaire and somebody comes and tells you, because Insights, for those who don't know, is basically personality profiling. But it then takes it beyond that and says, these aren't limiting factors. This is, if you didn't do anything about it, these are the labels that this is who you would be, but you can achieve anything you want to and be whatever. You just need to be able to access the right color energies, if you like, to be able to do it. But you know intrinsically who you are. And we went through probably a year's worth of journey with it. So we took it and we did it personally, we did it as teams, we did it as feedback modules, we did it as development. We worked with it a lot as a team.
You went really deep, actually, because a lot of organizations, you just literally do the questionnaire, you get sent your report. You might, if you've got a good line manager, you might have a conversation about it, and then they tend to get filed often, you know, you don't want to go through the journey. So that's really interesting.
So we lived and breathed it, and I think it was partly because my line manager lived and breathed it. So she was brilliant with it, and she's just a natural coach, and what she was really good at was, well, we actually then got an external facilitator, and that external facilitator stuck with us through the year. Right. So he walked us through lots of different things that we got back together and then developed and did with us as teams. And that's where, when you do it as a team, you go, oh my God, each one of us are individuals. And I can now understand why, if somebody says something, I react to it like this, but you react to it in a different way. And it's just how our brains work and how we are, that we are different. And you start to treat everybody as an individual, and you start to kind of go, if I'm going to speak to somebody, this is how I'm going to speak to them. And then and the only way you get to know how anybody else is by knowing who you are yourself first. And I think that's where I thought I got to the point of, actually, it's okay. I'm an introverted personality. I am not an extrovert, and I'm never going to I can't be one. And the amount of energy that I would expend to be an extrovert, it was just tiring me out. So why would I do it? Why would I not try to achieve some of those goals with the strengths that I've got? And I think that's what was a turning point for me, was you can achieve any of the outcomes that you want, but you've got to be true to yourself when you do it. Yeah. You can't be somebody else. I'm not going to stand on a podium and talk like somebody else does. I've got to talk like I do.
Yeah.
My style is my style. If I'm going to talk, it's going to be how I do it.
Yeah.
And the more natural you are, and the more honest you are, and the more humble you are, and I suppose the more open and honest you are with other people to show them your vulnerabilities, the easier it makes it for other people to connect to you, and easier for you to connect to them. And I think it just then intrinsically becomes a part of who you are. You just become comfortable with who you are. And I think that for me was quite a big thing, to finally go, so that's why I am who I am, and I've just got to be true to who I am.
Wow. That's really interesting. That's really, I mean, there is, and you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about the whole, sort of diversity and inclusion agenda. And often there is conversation about the fact that companies are finding it quite, I'm not going to say easy, but you can tick the diversity boxes, but actually the challenge is, how do you make it really inclusive so that people feel they can just be themselves? Do you know what I mean? That's the bit, isn't it? You want people to kind of just feel welcome, feel able to kind of just be who they are with their differences, celebrate the differences, show up just as they are, and kind of get things done.
And see, that's the one that's interesting, because I've always looked at diversity inclusion and I've kind of gone, why do you need to do it? And I think sometimes it's because how I feel, because I'm like, but I'm the most different that you could get, probably, but I don't need anybody else to make me feel included, and I'm not sure what I'd do sitting on one of those panels if I did. So I don't know, I just find it really bizarre, and I don't know, like you said, when you went to, you've got people out there going, well, I haven't got the right role models, and I'm going, I'm not sure I was looking for a role model that was like me.
I think,
ever.
Yeah, I think it's and obviously the reason for doing these interviews is because I have this belief that it's that there is a mindset thing, and for some people there's a mindset barrier. So for some people that difference, that perceived difference, actually stops them. So so one of the things, and I'm probably going to do a whole video on its own just around the impact of stereotypes and labels, but I came across something recently called stereotype threat, which I'd never heard of. And basically, it's the phenomenon where when you remind somebody of, almost like of their label, if that makes sense, before they, are about to do something like a test. So if they're going to sit like, their SATs or something like that, they actually, a proportion of them will underperform because they've been reminded of their stereotypes. So for example, if it's, women taking maths tests or something, when they're then reminded, you women now are going to take this test, apparently, so this is the science, there's science out there that basically says when they're reminded of the fact that they are female, they then underperform. So there's
Wow.
science out there, but I can see, and I think of all the people I've interviewed so far, I would say that, and it's probably to do with, as you say, your whole life you've been different in every setting you've gone into. So you've completely trained your mindset to just almost like eliminate that difference and not let it be a blocker. And that's kind of what I'm trying to tap into. Do you know what I mean? And some of the other people I've interviewed have talked about having that resilience, and they've experienced, incredible sort of like discrimination and racism when they were younger. And almost because of that, it's just made them much, much stronger as they've gotten older, to the point where they don't even see it now, and it just doesn't hold them back. Do you know what I mean? It's really fascinating.
But also, if you think about it, you can put a positive spin on it in terms of, so if somebody said to me, yeah, you're a bunch of women taking a maths test, I'd go, yeah, a bunch of women are going to be much better than a bunch of men taking a maths test. So yeah, we're going to ace this. It's like you say, it's training your mind. It says, rather than going, oh my God, it's like, yeah, better than you at this, so we will do better.
Yeah.
So, exactly. And if somebody said, added to that and said, oh, you're a Muslim Pakistani female, I'm like,
yeah,
bring it on.
Bring it, exactly. And that's the whole point. That's exactly what I'm trying to tap into, which there are some really great common themes that are coming out of these interviews, and I guess what I need to do, I probably need to interview some of the people as well that are kind of, that have allowed those those kind of gremlins in their heads to sort of hold them back a little bit, to understand why and how. But
I think there are so many other things that end up holding you back sometimes as well. So it's not just, and if you layer this on top, you're not really going to get anywhere.
Yeah, you create a real obstacle, because there are, as you say, there are other obstacles. So if you can't get your head in the space where you can sort of look past this, then it will be a real blocker.
Yeah,
definitely. So so just in terms of where we are now, so you're doing your radio thing. In terms of work and sort of finance, what's next for you? Where do you see yourself going?
Do you know what? I was asking myself that question yesterday because Like I said, I have taken out time a few times to reflect and do, and the most recent one actually was when I left Argos before I joined Inchcape. And I had about 8 months, so I took redundancy from Argos, and I had about 8 months, and in those 8 months I got myself a coach, personal development, and kind of tried to figure out what my goal in life was. And I actually pulled together kind of what I wanted to achieve out of life and what my kind of mini goals would be, and all that kind of stuff. And I pulled that paper out the other day and I was going, oh, I think I've ticked some of these boxes, but I don't think it's forefront of my mind enough to do all of that. And one of the things that I was trying to discover then, having worked in finance all my life and then working with people, is I know how much I like the people side of stuff. And I knew that it started off, one of the reasons I got a coach was I wanted to figure out whether I wanted to go into coaching.
Right.
And I discovered as part of that journey was that although I wanted to do that, I'm not sure I wanted to do it as a profession per se. Right. I wanted to use it more to bring benefit to people, you know, just on the side, if you like, but not as a full-time thing. And actually, I still had some kind of a passion of working with businesses, but not necessarily in true finance. But, you know, I still wanted to do that. And actually, Inchcape gave me the perfect opportunity, because I remember when I went in there and I said, I'm not quite sure what I want to do. And Claire at the time said to me, she said, well, this is your perfect kind of opportunity, because you'll have a big enough team, which gives you all the people element, and it's a finance role, and you'll be able to figure out and use this year as a test to figure out whether you want to go down the finance route or whether you want to go around kind of the other route. And as part of that, I was lucky enough to meet you and the whole transformation piece. And I really, really enjoyed the bits that I got to do in there, which you were still part of the business, but you could work with people. Things have kind of been a little different for the last couple of months because of everything that's been going on with the lockdown situation that we're in. And, you know, the agenda just hasn't kicked off in true earnest. So I don't know. And because it's Ramadan, I've gone back to connecting with, you know, the religion and all of those bits. And I'm a sucker for these. I keep joining courses to do different things. So at the minute, I'm doing a course which is with a Quran coach.
Okay.
So he's actually coached by profession, Muslim guy, and he's actually known in the media as one of the best Quran coaches. But he coaches you how to build a connection with the holy book, the Quran, and how you can then lead your life through that. And it's very practical, logical steps. So he's not a scholar. He's not one of those, you know, it's not like you can ask him all these questions about is this right or wrong. It's not that. He just uses coaching techniques and says, this is how your brain works. So I need you to read it in English and then try and read it in Arabic and then do this. It gives you some really practical steps to do. And I thought, wow, if I can do that, because I'd never in my life imagined that I could do all of those things that he says I can do. If I can do that, I'd love to be able to show people how they could do it. And, you know, he's not cheap, and no, people can't always pay that kind of money to do those things. And I go, do you know what? I could just tell people what to do, you know? So I have this intrinsic, and when I did my life goal piece, the thing that comes out right at the top of what I want to achieve in life is to help people. So earning money is a must that needs to happen on the side. But for me, helping people achieve their potential in whatever manner to allow them to tap into their brains to go, is that little chimp that's telling you can't do that. You have got the potential to do whatever you need to do. You've just got to put a little bit of effort into it though, but you've got to keep going with it. And you've got to understand who you are and how you tick and what works best for you to get there. But I still haven't figured out how I achieve all of these things. I feel like I keep going on the journey of trying to figure it out myself first before I take on the next step. But
it's going to come.
I'm kind of there.
I can see, I can feel it. It's going to come quite soon, I think. And I almost think, you know, obviously we're in lockdown, and you know, as tragic and as challenging as these times are, from a perspective of time and reflection, it's a real, you know, we'll never have an opportunity like this again. Do you know what I mean? To kind of take this much time out. So I can definitely see, I see big changes on the horizon for you.
Fingers crossed.
What are you we're almost finishing up now. Are you into sort of books or podcasts or?
I've always been more into books.
Yeah.
Because I like the feel of a book, and once I've read it, I am one of those people that like to have it on my bookshelf and think I can go back to it. Yeah. But more recently, especially when I've got a 5-year-old at home all the time, it's easier to listen to stuff because I can keep pausing it when I need to. And I can watch what she's doing while I'm, because it's a kind of a constant thing going on, and I can rewind and I think if I read a book, I have to read it either late at night when she's already gone to bed, I can't read a book with her around, because the interruptions while reading a book are far worse, I think, because you forget where you were, rather than listening to something, and I think it's easier to do. So I am gradually, I think, transferring to audiobooks and that kind of stuff, but I'm not quite there yet.
What are you so right now, what are you reading or what are you listening to? So if there's a podcast or an audiobook, or what's the thing that you're going to at the moment?
So at the minute, because it's Ramadan, for me what I'm going for is mostly all religious. So I'm doing this the Quran, it's called the Quran for Busy People, exactly is what he calls it. And he has a module, a series of like 16 modules that you need to listen to, but you have to then start to do them. So I think I'm on module 7, and they're about an hour long each. So I've been listening to an hour worth of that every day. I've then been reading the Quran in Arabic, but I do that when she's not around. So I tend to do that first thing in the morning or late at night or something when she's gone to bed. But yeah, so generally speaking, the stuff that I am doing at the minute is that. Before Ramadan started, I'm part of a book club, so we have lots of different books that we try and read, and I have, because we moved house a little while ago, I just stopped my whole reading process, and everything I'd pick one up and I wouldn't have time to do it, and I'd leave again. So I just started to go back to some of those titles that I hadn't read. Okay. And they're all generally all fiction, except for Malcolm X isn't the fiction one, which every time I start reading it I go, it's too hefty, and I put it back down again.
Yeah, somebody else in one of these interviews mentioned that book, actually, one of their favourites.
But I haven't read that, I'm not going to lie, I haven't read that yet, but the rest are all pretty much smaller, slimmer books. And also I've ordered again, proper books, not audiobooks. I don't even know if they are available on audiobooks, but more to do with adoption. So we are also trying to go through the adoption process these days. So I just ordered a book which is about, I don't know what it's called, but it's where if you bring another child into your house when you've already got one, how you deal with that.
Yeah, interesting. We could do a whole nother video on that piece.
Yeah, we can.
What are some of the biggest lessons that you'd say you've learned sort of, in your career or in your sort of like life's journey?
I think nothing's really such a big deal is one of the things that I've learned. I think we place so much emphasis on little things going wrong, or oh my God, and what am I going to do, that actually in the grand scheme of things, all those little things, there's nothing to really worry about. So I'm not a worrier. Right. I don't generally worry about stuff. And some of it comes, actually, it's genetics. My mum's not a worrier. So, and I think the other thing that has really made me who I am today has been my faith. Yeah. So one of the things that Islam teaches you about is, Allah has a plan for you, and why are you worrying about it? And trust your affairs to him and just get on with it. So I'm just like, and the whole control the controllable. Actually, I was actually telling my husband that he was whinging about something 2 nights ago, and I just looked at him and I went, and what can you do about that in lockdown? And he went, nothing. And I went, so control the controllable. And he just looked at me and went, that is not just management spiel, that is for real. You can't control it. Why are you spending your energy on something that you cannot control? And I think that's been one of the biggest learnings that I have over years, is you can't do anything about it. Stop wasting your energy. Use your energy on something that's far more productive.
Definitely. And finally, do you ever have any fears or kind of like self-doubt? Do you ever get riddled with sort of like imposter syndrome?
I think at the beginning of things I sometimes do. So like even simple things like RFM, I was a bit like, oh, I'm going live on radio, and I've never done radio before, and how am I going to sound, and what are people going to think, and so there's always that little bit of that. Imposter syndrome, I think, is something that anybody and everybody goes through at some point, but you gradually get over it. And I think once you've taken that done it the first time, let's say, that's it. Once you've done it the first time, you've broken that, and then you just move on. You know, you go into a new role in your career, for example, you just think, oh, God knows, am I going to fill the boots of the last person that was there? And how am I ever going to know everything? And I don't know, I'm sitting in this meeting and I'm saying something I don't actually know if that's right or wrong, but, you know, we'll go with it for today. I think everybody has that. I think the important thing is, how do you deal with it? It's how do you overcome that so that it doesn't overtake or doesn't just become this big fear or something around you. And everybody has different coping mechanisms, so it's just learning your own coping mechanism so you know what they are. So yeah, I think we all get them at times. It's just getting over it.
And then the very last question, what advice would you give to your younger self?
To my younger self, I think at that, I would say I probably could have achieved more in my life earlier on, if I hadn't doubted myself at times. I think there are times when I probably didn't take the leap of faith that I should have taken, thinking, you know, I'm not sure I can achieve that, when actually I could have achieved it. And it was that little chimp that sat there that said, you're not good enough. And had I learned some of that way earlier on, but how different would my journey been? I don't know. I don't know.
No regrets, eh?
No, I don't have regrets.
Okay, good. All right, then we will leave it there. So thank you so much, Shazia. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Okay, we will end it there.